Our speaker today is somebody who is on her journey and is willing to share it with us, and I think that's always a beautiful gift. And it's Dr. Rita Conrad. So Rita, come on up, please.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to say that so that my microphone is on, right? Yeah, good. All right. This is dangerous to do this. But I may have to go back there and get it. And I've learned that this is going to be a sit-down talk. Because after you hear the beginning of this, you'll understand why I'm sitting down. Okay, is that good? Is that good? Okay, good. Yes. Is that good? Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm getting my Kleenex out for that beautiful face because it's going to need it. So, good morning. As you know from the newsletter, the theme for this month is shadow. I'm surprised you all are here to hear about shadow. The article that was in the newsletter did a magnificent job. It really summarized what Carl Jung was trying to tell us and his characterization of shadow, and noted that while it's often associated with negativity, the shadow holds immense significance for personal growth. I appreciated that particularly. But I will be honest with you. I had a hard time thinking about how to talk about this topic in positive terms, positive, productive terms. I was hung up on the shadow being that inevitable dark side of us. At 9:30 last night, I was talking to Larry and I said, I can't seem to pull this together. I can't seem to bring it all together. I have pieces, but nothing is converging. And he responded by saying, this is so un-Rita-like of you. My husband's online. Thank you, Larry. But I worked on it a bit more and I went to bed at midnight thinking, okay, I've got a handle on it and I'll just get up at 6 o'clock and finish it. I've done this before and it's fine. I started tossing and turning around 4:30 and finally got up at 5:30 because I realized why I was having such a hard time with this topic. I just didn't want to believe in this concept of an inevitable dark side in each of us. Last night, Larry and I took the time to have a little date night. Date night for us is a movie and popcorn at home, as it has been for years. And we watched the 2007 movie called The Great Debaters. And it's on Netflix. Denzel Washington is in it. I love Denzel Washington. And Oprah Winfrey produced it, so you know it's a quality work. It's a drama based on the true story of Melvin B. Tolson, a professor at Wiley College, a historically black college in Marshall, Texas. And in 1935, during the Jim Crow era, he inspired students to form the school's first debate team, which in the film goes on to challenge Harvard in the national championship. But in reality, the Wiley team instead debated the University of Southern California, who were the champions at the time. And they went on to win this. They won. However, even though they beat the reigning champions, Wiley was not allowed to officially call themselves champions because they were not full members of the debate society. People of color were not admitted to the society until after World War II. In the movie, the team with Professor Tolson are driving late at night to get to the boarding house they'll stay at for the debate the next day. And they got a little lost, and if you've ever been in the country, in the South, you can get lost a lot. You take a wrong turn and you end up on a dark country road. And that's what happened to them. And at the end of this road, they see a fire. And around the fire are a group of white men. And hanging over the fire is a young black boy who has clearly died, and they are burning him. One of the debate team members wants to get out of the car and cut the boy down, but the mob realizes and recognizes, hey, there's more people in this car, let's go get them. And the professor backs the car all the way up to the main road as fast as he possibly can, and he's successful. They make it to the boarding house, but these are young kids who have heard and known about this, but never firsthand seen it, so they're rather shaken, and one of those is only 14 years old. The scene is handled well in the movie. It is not gratuitous, over-the-top violence, as is often the case in movies. It is there to make a point that this is what really happened. This is what many have had to live through in our country. And as I thought about that movie scene early this morning, I thought, how can I not believe that there is darkness lurking in each of us? But on the other hand, what I am even more certain of is that each of us is here to be love and light. And that is why we come every Sunday, to bolster that within us. To not allow shadow to overtake us and consume us, as was clearly the case with that lynch mob, and has been the case with many other events that have occurred and continue to occur today. That movie also made me think of Miss Val. Alec, do you remember Miss Val? She was in junior high. She was your paraprofessional in Alec's special education class. And for those of you who don't know education lingo, paraprofessionals are teacher's aides. Yes, she loved you. One day I came into and this was in North Carolina, so I'm gonna use my North Carolina accent. I got one. One day I came into the classroom to pick Alec up, and there's Ms. Val telling him, Alec, don't worry, I gotcha, I gotcha, I gotcha, stop worrying, I gotcha. Then she turned to me, this little black woman, not even 5 foot tall, with a big smile, and said in her Carolina accent, I just love that boy. He is so much like my own son. He is just my own. And on Alec's graduation day, we have a picture of you with Miss Val, and she's there, you know, proud mama. The boy got through. As they say in the South, not a mean bone in that woman's body. There was a woman without a shadow. She could have looked at me and hated me for the color of my skin and what had been done to her people. She could have looked down on my son as different, as some of my own people had done. But she didn't. Ms. Val reminds me that, as might be said in the South, if the light is bright, there's no need to fight. Not only does the memory of Ms. Val help me believe that we can live in a shadowless society, but what bolsters this is a little factoid I ran across while I was researching shadow, and it had to do with shadow work, which is the exploration of the underlying emotions and beliefs that cause us to react in certain ways. These reactions are sometimes referred to being triggered. Other people call that a shadow sneak attack. Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, author of Women Who Run with the Wolves, many of us remember that book, is one who talks about shadow sneak attacks that happen when we ignore our shadow and things build up within ourselves like a tire that has a bulge on the side of it, and eventually it explodes. The author Joseph Fasano pointed out that if you deny your shadow, it becomes your tyrant. And shadow sneak attacks may be one indicator that you may be moving in this direction. Shadow work is meant to examine those false beliefs and underlying triggering events. The little factoid I ran across was that since October of this past year, there are over 2 billion, and I got to say that again because every time I think of billion, 2 billion people engaged in shadow work in, of all places, TikTok, which for those of you who may not know what TikTok is, there's 2 of you who know what TikTok is right here. It's where the kids, otherwise known as anybody 30 plus years younger than I am, go to get away from having to friend grandma and grandpa. So that's TikTok. And there are 2 billion people. Usually we think of doing shadow work with a therapist, but on TikTok, they're focusing on using primarily journaling techniques. And there are 2 billion people sharing journaling prompts and videoing their own experiences as they do this work and try to help other people. And my mind is just boggled by that. This is the movement. Shadow work is now a movement from TikTok. So how do we, on Facebook, contribute to this movement? What can you do if you notice you're being more reactive when interacting with others or with a situation? This past November, December, I took a 6-week course entitled The Art of Quantum Living. And it sounds joyful and innocuous. And what it was, once I got into it, was shadow work. It was developed by Reverend Dr. Jane Simmons and Reverend Dr. Gary Simmons. And many of you may be familiar with Gary's book, The Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict and Creating Peace. And this course is then an extension of that book. And they've collaborated with another person on it as well. The Art of Quantum Living is an experiential course, which means you have to live what it is you are studying. And not just talk about it, read about it, talk about it, write a paper. You have to do it. And it's 6 weeks of what the Simmons team refers to as aware-apy. And I have to say that, aware-apy. Not therapy, not the therapeutic medical treatment, but developing and using a heightened awareness of what is happening in any particular moment and why we are feeling triggered in a particular moment. And Jane and Gary's work speaks to me because they focus on remembering our wholeness, not mitigating the shadow. They may mention the shadow in passing, but it is all about wholeness and oneness. The point of the art of living, of quantum living, was to understand the triggers and what to do about them. And the things I'll share with you now are based on a subset of their work. It's not everything because I only have 20 minutes. And I'm going to exceed that. So the first trigger we dealt with were the external types of triggers, the ones that were based on it being someone else's fault that we're upset or hurt. We all know these types of triggers well. It's the person we think of who we believe has gotten up that morning and said, gee, it's a beautiful day. I wonder what Rita's doing. I bet she's out on the highway singing at the top of her lungs in her car, and I'm going to go and tailgate her, and she's going to gesture to me in her rearview mirror, and that will finish her day. That ought to squelch that happiness. Then think about enemies that we have made, because we just made an enemy of a person we really don't know. Think about the enemies we've made of those who are closest to you, to us, particularly over that silly human-created thing called politics. I was in an intense conversation with a friend of mine over politics, and right after he said, well, that's just your feminist tendencies talking. And the flames were just about to come off the top of my head and the daggers out of my eyes. I knew I was being triggered. And I shut my mouth so hard, my jaw clicked. And I thought, nope, I am not going there. We are not getting into you're this, I'm that, World War III. These are the kind of things that I've let destroy my inner peace in the past. When I'm aware of what I'm doing and how I am distorting an experience, I'm able to make a different choice in dealing with those things. What? This crazy person is speaking is me. Stop and reassess. That doesn't mean giving up or giving in. It's all about knowing who you are and continuing to return to that spirit within, to being centered every moment, which admittedly takes a lot of practice, but it's worth it. In The Eye of the Storm, Gary Simmons tells the story of a 9-year-old boy named Scott who had been getting bullied at school and went on to learn Taekwondo. And Scott said, before I became a black belt, if someone pushed me around, I either ran away or had to fight because I was afraid. Now that I'm a black belt, if someone wants to fight me, I walk away. And Gary goes on to say, Scott didn't need to fight because his training taught him how to be connected to his sense of well-being and wholeness. He learned that fear forces action, creates enemies, while centeredness and confidence reveals choices and options. In addition to external triggers, we of course have those internal triggers, the place where we can say we are our own worst enemy. We make an enemy of who we are. We're not good enough. We're self-critical and replaying memories in which our unworthiness in some area is on full display. That's what we remember. Last night at 9:30, when this talk was still not settling in for me, I started thinking, oh my gosh, I've lost my edge. I can't get it together. See, I knew I wasn't cut out to do this. And it registered that I was triggering. In fact, even now, Larry can look at me and say, are you triggering? Yes, I am triggering. Friday night, we had a discussion. He goes, well, don't get mad at me. I go, I'm not mad at you, I'm triggering. So it registered with me that I was triggering, and I could stop and breathe and go take a bubble bath and tell myself, even if I had to get up at 5 in the morning, which I did, to finish this, it would be okay. I am competent. I went to bed going, whatever it is, it's going to come. Being aware that I'm triggering has paved the way for a new level of internal peace for me. I may still be concerned about things, but there's a new level of internal peace. And that awareness helps me stop myself from spiraling downward so that I can deal with what's underneath later. I have a workbook that has some of those worksheets we used in class, and there's stick-em notes, all this. Make sure you figure out why you triggered here. And, why. And I just put another stick-em note in the book and go, deal with that tonight. Because it's become a part of my spiritual practice. It's prayer, meditation, deal with your triggers. Once we're aware of a trigger, we can work on uncovering the belief underneath it. And we do this by sinking into our heart and asking honestly and openly, what are you trying to tell me? What belief is trying to get my attention? And this can be done in meditation or through journaling or other contemplative practices you may have. After this awareness settles in and you've realized there are no enemies, then Jane and Gary recommend expressing gratitude for the trigger. Thank you for making me angry. I'm really pleased about this. We thank the trigger and the opportunity to recognize what needs to be healed. That's a better thing. It's better for me to focus on. For me, this dispels the notion that I might have that I am inherently flawed by shadow. And after this, I can create a new outcome. In fact, Judy Jones, I think you're online. I thought of you as I was writing this about creating a new outcome because last week in the inspirational reading, you read about how the brain it doesn't care what you store in it. It doesn't say, oh, that's a false memory, that's a bad memory. It just takes the memory in, and that we have a chance to rewrite that memory. And this is what creating a new outcome is about. Seeing yourself responding to this same situation where you're starting to get triggered and responding to it with a feeling of safety, security, an experience of self-love, connectedness, empowerment, self-worth. Coming from that center changes the outcome. And in doing this, the energy in our body begins to shift. You relive the moment in alignment with who you've come here to be. And the step after creating a new outcome is taking action. Okay, you've created a new outcome. Now it's time for self-compassion and self-care, because good on you, you've gone through this process. So do something for yourself or do something for the other person. You may set aside time to connect and correct a misunderstanding with them, or writing up to them about an expectancy of them that you're going to just let drop right now because you know it's unrealistic. And self-care, such as reading a book, getting a massage, doing yoga, going to bed early. So, to recap, to be part of this movement of shadow work, awareness of the trigger, gratitude for the trigger. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Create a new outcome based on who you truly are. That beacon of light and love that is all of our purpose, of all the reason why we came here. And then taking authentic action, which rebalances you. So in the Art of Quantum Living course, it took me 21 days of daily practicing what triggered me today, and I went through this long worksheet of why did that happen, what was lack, it was a process every day for 21 days, what was the trigger? And ironically, there was a trigger every single day. It caught me by surprise that I am triggered every day. And by the end of the course, I felt as if I'd had 1,000 Band-Aids plastered all over my body, and then somebody just took it and yanked them all off at once. I was so raw and just, oh my gosh, so many things had been cleared and were new. But instead of pain, there was this feeling of a new depth of healing, and that's the best way that I can characterize what's been happening. And since then, while I can't say that nothing triggers me, certainly less triggers me. And what does trigger me is less intense. When someone drives their car in a manner that it's not the way I would do it, I can shrug and smile, and because the hills are so green, and I'm just about done with this Sunday talk. I'm not as distracted from the joy of living as I once was. The title of this talk is Be the Light of Your Shadow. And this is a quote from Marcella Rakic, a Dutch artist. I chose it because while I was preparing this talk, one of the questions I thought about was, can a light bulb have a shadow? And I decided that if it was encased in clear, unobstructed glass, it could not have a shadow. For me, shadow is all about obstructions to my light, the human-created distractions from my purpose here. Not that I have an entire dark side, lurking on the sidelines, just waiting to overtake me. I choose to focus on the obstructions because I can do something about those. I can center and affirm my wholeness. The poet Kaman Kajuri wrote, "You have to be transparent, so you no longer cast a shadow, but instead let the light pass through you." I am the light of my shadow, not just shining on it, but shining through it and shining brighter because of it. So as it is for me, so I invite it to be for all of you. Be the light of your shadow.